Welcome to tonight's webinar with the Medical Association of Atlanta. We're pleased to have as our guest Dr. Rich McCormick, who is running for the 6th District in Congress. Rich, we're so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming and participating with us.
Well, it's absolutely my honor. It's an honor to be a physician with you and so many others that are trying to serve patients' best interests, especially in a time where medicine has been absolutely politicized. And we're really fighting for control of medicine. Who's going to be in control of it? Is it going to be administrators or is it going to be doctors?
Well, that's so important to point out. And the thing that really is interesting for all the doctors who are going to be seeing this and others is, who are the doctors in DC who are representing Georgia, or are there any?
There used to be Tom Price. There used to be Phil Gingrey. So we used to have some really good representation just from Georgia. And I realized there's only about 15 members up there that have medical degrees. And there's about 177 that have law degrees. So there's a bit of imbalance, especially when you're talking about developing one of the biggest, most costly healthcare systems in America, when the government has so much to do with the cost and where we're spending money, as far as whether it be on pharmaceuticals, insurance, hospital systems, physician care, how we're represented, whether it's going to be physicians determining their own value, if there's fair market competition, or if there's going to be monopolistic practices, whether mid-levels start to dominate procedures, or other people who aren't even credentialed in specialties get to do certain things. Then we're starting to lose control of all that. Not to mention, even with our coding and our credentialing. Once the government says we control all the credentialing, then how do you ever speak out against the government from that point on? We basically become state-run, and we'll never be able to have a difference of opinion, because if we disagree with the state, they can disbar you eventually. Essentially, they can take away your accreditation, which would be criminal in my opinion.
Well, I think that we pretty much have a good understanding already that you would be qualified. But let me ask you this. Why would a guy who's successful, had a brilliant military career and campaign, and thank you for serving our country, why would you decide to be a doctor and then decide to get into politics?
Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Rich McCormick, and I served 16 years as a Marine Corps helicopter pilot. Did some airborne time, and I served in the Persian Gulf and off the coast of Somalia and in Rwanda, and then became an ER doctor. Supposed to go to JSOC, which is with the SEALs and the Delta Force, and literally was praying about it, because those guys were gone for 9 months out of the year right after 9/11. It hit me like a thunderbolt. I'm supposed to be an ER doc. Now, this is a guy who didn't take academics very seriously, who Marines are famous for eating crayons, but I felt like I was being led to medicine. And when I found I had to do pre-med and I wanted to be at a university, I asked if I could be, and nothing lined up except for the fact that I had an MBA. And luckily that got me to Georgia Tech and Morehouse to do my pre-med. I went to Morehouse School of Medicine, where I was student body president. Then went to Emory for my residency for emergency medicine. I served my last 4 years in the military on Camp Lejeune and in Afghanistan as the head of emergency medicine in Kandahar. Retired then with my then wife, came back to Georgia. It was her decision. Her name is Dr. Deborah Miller. She's an oncologist. She's brilliant. Unlike me, she knew she was going to be a doctor since she was a little girl. She's always been summa cum laude. I've always been thank the good Lord. And there's just a difference in the way we approach life. But I was thankful to be an ER doc, and went down with the Medical Association of Georgia to the Capitol to fight against surprise billing, which we had a great bipartisan group of people backed by patient advocacy. And unfortunately, it was the Republicans, my own party, who were sold out to special interests and really caused a lot of grief in our second year of trying to pass something. And it got me angry, and I was ranting about it. And they said, well, look, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so they encouraged me to run. And I did like all good Marines. I went home and asked my wife's permission. And when she got behind me, it was no stopping us. So I feel like we're in a great position to win this election and be a voice for everyone who's a physician, whether you're in my district or not. this will affect you. We have very few physicians up there, and having somebody who understands the unique challenges of medicine now, how we're losing our voice, how we're not really in control of pricing, which is bad for patients. And when it's bad for patients, it's bad for us as doctors. When we can't get a pre-approval process, when we're having runaway costs and people blame doctors instead of laying the blame where it really belongs. And we don't really care about blame. We want to solve the problem, because if we don't solve the problem, we go to a single payer system. America, quite frankly, cannot absorb $30 trillion more in taxation or in just printing inflation money in order to pay for a healthcare system that would not be superior. We have the VA. It's the only single payer system we know. Imagine what it would be like if government's in control of all medicine and they set the bar. Imagine if everything was on demand, such as, let's say LASIK eye surgery being competitive, pricing transparent procedure that's gone from $4,000 an eye down to $800 an eye. If it was run by the government, it'd be $10,000 an eye by now. I mean, this is just how government works. Everybody still gets to wet their beak, and we don't have competition. We don't have fair market pricing. And not only do you not make money off it, well, at least not doctors don't, but the wrong people make money off it, and it becomes anti-competitive and bad for patient care.
Well, that brings up a good point. What do you think about this whole COVID thing? Do you think the COVID outbreak was politicized? Do you feel like we as physicians and government policy can better handle the outbreaks in the future? What are your thoughts?
100%. Now, here's what's interesting. We're all in the same church of physicians, if you will. And just because we go to the same church doesn't mean we all believe the same thing, just like any church. I think it's really important that we as physicians are able to have a legitimate conversation between each other. And even where we disagree, we all can bring something to the table to discuss the merit of vaccinations, who needs vaccinations, when they need a vaccination. Most physicians can acknowledge there was a serious benefit from getting vaccination for those people in high risk categories, especially in the beginning. But a lot of us also could say, at this point where we have a vaccination that was made for an older variant, where most people are actually immune, that's not always the best thing for people to get a vaccination when you're already immune. And you may have a hypercoagulable state or some sort of hyperimmune response, or at least we could admit that it's a good discussion to have between a physician and a patient, rather than a government throwing out rules as if they know what medicine's about better than we do. I think it's really important. Look, Dr. Lister used to talk about people cleaning their hands back a long time ago, and people chastised for them because they didn't want to have a discussion between physicians. They ostracized him. And yet people were putting their dirty fingers into a president who had been shot, didn't die of his gun wound, but of infected wound because they didn't wash their hands, like Dr. Lister said. We need to have discussions. We need to have difference of opinions and respect each other in our application of what we believe was best for this outbreak without being censored by a government. I think that's a very bad precedent to be had for any disease process. And I understand there's some outrageous things that are being said by certain people. But that's worth a discussion at least. And I think the public is smart enough, at least by and large, to understand that there's a conversation to be had. And when you demonize or censor certain doctors, it only makes the problem worse. It only makes the outliers more powerful. And it doesn't help the conversation when you don't have freedom of speech inside of health professionals.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? We got to be colleagues. I guess what you're saying is, even if you're a physician and you don't live in District 6, if you live in 4, 5, and all the other districts, you still want a great doctor representing you in DC. And when you get to DC, Rich, what do you think about Medicare, the Band-Aids we keep putting on it, and coming up with a solution that's more durable? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let's say that this is going to be probably the biggest gain we've made for the Republican Party in since 1994. So in 20 years, or sorry, I guess that's 30 years now. Geez. This is literally going to be a landslide class. They're predicting up to 70 or more seats coming over. That makes us the biggest freshman class in a very, very, very long time. This class will have the opportunity to come in, if we do it right, before the general's even up. We can come in with a plan that may very well save medicine from being taken over by the government. It would very much, instead of putting a Band-Aid on something, I mean, look, we've all been called heroes in the last couple of years. Oh, heroes, first responders, doctors, you're putting your life on line to save American lives. Thank you so much. By the way, thank you. We're going to defund Medicaid. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that. We're going to cut funding of your government funded programs that basically set the bar for all insurance reimbursements. They keep on doing this and threatening us with it every year as if that's the best solution for cutting healthcare costs. We know it's not. We know that's not. Reimbursements for physicians is one of the smallest portions of healthcare cost increases. Matter of fact, it has nothing to do with the increases. We know that PBMs and pharmaceuticals and insurance companies and monopolistic practices between hospital systems have driven this pricing up independently of physicians who are literally losing control of medicine now. We're losing our ability to regulate ourselves. When we're told that the government controls our credentialing and they control who gets to do what procedures and what billing codes are used, that gets to be very dangerous. When we have no competing organizations of who credentials us, and the government gets to decide what we believe and what we don't believe. Otherwise, they take away your ability to practice medicine. That should scare people. The government was never intended to be like that, not involved in medicine or anything else, including businesses. And we as physicians have to be very guarded about handing over the keys to government agencies who want to tell us what to say or else. Anytime the government says you believe what we believe or else, we have totally lost medicine, and that should be a very scary thing, whether you're liberal or conservative. We want to maintain our own voice. That's the First Amendment.
And, you know, it's important because we have the sanctity of the physician-patient relationship. How do we do that and maintain a strong standard of public health?
Yeah, so the danger, and I understand why some people talk about sanctioning different people or censoring people because they're saying things that could be dangerous. I think no matter what we say, there's going to be dangerous thought process out there. The more you censor people, the more people get suspicious and come up with conspiracy theories. I think it is important to have a standard. I think it's important to have a CDC that has reasonable thought process out there. It should never be politicized. It shouldn't be driven by a president. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I don't think it should be driven by Congress. It should be run by a respected healthcare professional who's not going to get political, but who's going to truly back scientific studies that aren't based on rigging the game, so to speak, but allowing people to come to the table and have a good roundtable type discussion that we can come up with something. And my gosh, if you want to solve something, don't politicize it. The worst possible thing you can do in solving something is make it political, because 50% of the people are going to be on one side and 50 on the other side. It's like saying that the government's going to solve racism. When did the government ever get in the idea of solving anything that's moral? When it's really something about sitting down with somebody and having dinner with them and getting to know them and actually having a conversation that's not political. Same thing with medicine, having a conversation that's not political, but based on medical literature, based on studies that have been designed right, not politically. And then having that discussion openly without hiding things, and then letting people actually digest that. And we're not going to agree with each other, and the people aren't going to agree with who they support. But at least we've had that vetted conversation rather than having a government getting more and more suspicious in their activities.
That's so true. I'm thinking as a cardiologist of how blessed I've been with colleagues that work together to help innovate and come up with things like the STEMI programs where we reduce mortality by 50% because we work together. Let's talk about you being on the front lines in the emergency room, seeing overdoses and other mental health problems. It's a rising concern. Why do you think we're having this mental health crisis?
Oh, well, for one, interesting. We haven't really talked about this a whole lot compared to COVID, which is a problem, but obviously it's diminished greatly. I mean, tremendously. I don't think I've admitted somebody directly for COVID in over a month, but what I've seen is in the last week, a 17-year-old and a 36-year-old that died. I could not revive them once they came in because they'd had opioid overdoses. I assume it was fentanyl. In one night, I had 5 overdoses and 2 alcohol-related problems also. All one night, 7 patients out of my 20 patients were overdose or drug or alcohol-related. Quite frankly, we deal with a lot of first world problems here in our emergency medicine department, where we have a ton of drug problems, alcohol problems, suicidality, depression, anxiety. The psychiatric problems that we have in America are real. Some of it comes because we've really made this a depressing place to live, where people have lost control of their lives. When you don't have control of your own decisions, when you can't decide how to run your business, or when you feel constantly in fear and you can't just live your life according to what you want to do, it really starts to wear you out. And the domestic abuse rise that we saw, and going back to what you said, you're a cardiologist. Our cardiologists, our survival rate of myocardial infarctions and strokes is far and away better than any other country. Our ability to detect and treat these disease processes blow everybody out of the water. And I think that's an important conversation to have of what makes our medicine good and where we lack. One of the reasons we have such a high mortality rate and a lower survival rate is because of gun violence. But what they don't tell you is that over 70% of that is suicide. Gun violence, a large part of gun violence is suicide. That's a mental health condition. So we need to really address the weak points in our healthcare system, and then keep on doing what we do really well, which is treat some really big problems like heart attacks and strokes.
That's a humbling point. And I think Georgia has passed some legislation. What do you think about Georgia and the legislation with mental health?
So we made a mistake off the bat when we came up with HB 1013. It was good in intent, a little bit overreaching. We have to be careful. I know in our hospital system, for example, we have to be careful if somebody comes in with mental illness that we don't take their clothes and their phones and instantly make them lose their rights before we actually designate that they are going to truly do harm to themselves. We have to be careful that we don't overreach as a hospital system or a local government, that we get outside the Constitution, because it's indefensible. We need to make sure that we don't overreach in any part of the government past our individual rights. I don't care whether it's taxation, regulation, or in our case, mental health. I think the bill had some good intentions, but I think the government has to be very careful not to step in and make insurance companies cover things that maybe they shouldn't. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't address healthcare and the mental health care. I think the Senate bill was far superior. They curtailed it so that would be much more representative of what we're trying to get done. So it's a better bill now. But I think the original bill was outside the lines and wasn't as well vetted as it should have been. But I like the final product a lot better.
Good. All right. How about pharmaceuticals? So Medicare and pharmaceuticals and runaway prices, and patients can't get these incredible drugs that would help them so much, but they can't afford them. What do you think about that?
Let's start with what was said recently in the President's State of the Union. He talked about capping insulin at $35. Believe it or not, that's something that Trump had said too. So I thought that was a little ironic, because the reason it wasn't capped is because the executive order by Trump was done away with by Biden, and then he brought it back as if it was a new thing during his speech. And I don't say that to say that Trump did a good thing and Biden did a bad thing. They both did the same thing in the end, but it was an artificial fix. And as a matter of fact, it benefited very few patients. I think less than 10% of the patients get any benefit out of that at all. And it really doesn't help the uninsured. This was never intended to help the masses, which is what we need to be focused on. We know that in Canada, they pay like 1/10 the price for insulin. It's chemically identical. There's no difference. It's not unsafe. Why do we not have an open market system that drives the prices down in a fair market way that would give people affordable insulin, which is one of the biggest problems we have in America, is these chronic health problems that we don't treat the right way. When you're saying, oh, you need a coupon or you need whatever, that's BS. Let's face it. We're at a crossroads. We have to decide if we're going to be competitive, or we're going to continue to force the market out of pricing, and eventually people are going to demand a single payer system, which, you know, for a fact, the insurance companies, the PBMs, the pharmaceuticals are still going to take their cut off of that. So the only ones that are going to get screwed is us as physicians. Honestly, it's still going to be extremely expensive. The conservative estimates of the price of medicine for one single payer system is $30 trillion in addition to our budget right now in the next 10 years. $30 trillion. That is the same that our entire national debt is that we built up during the lifetime of a nation. So that money would have to be either made up with $30 trillion more in new taxes, or $30 trillion more, or a combination thereof of printing extra money, which is inflationary. So we have to be very careful about our decisions. This would be the biggest step towards government control of any single aspect of our lives ever. It would be the biggest spending bill ever for the United States we've ever had. And once again, we continue to give up more control of medicine to the government and less by physicians, which we're already woefully ill-prepared for, with about, I think what you said is 60% of physicians are now our employees. We're losing control. The American Medical Association, which used to be a representative of a large majority of us, now is only a fraction. And they're funded by the government based on coding. That means the government if they don't go along with the government, they lose their funding. So of course they're going to go along with the government. They don't represent us anymore. And that's a problem. And now I like the American Medical Association. I want to have a friendly relationship with them. I want them to represent us. They need to pay attention to us. But if their membership is waning to the point where they have to get their funding from an entity that controls what they say, that's a problem. And I'm not demonizing the American Medical Association. We all have that tendency, though, to say what the people who are in control of our destiny want us to say. And that's why I say if we only have credentialing from a source that's controlled by the government, and they say they all want us to support, it doesn't matter if it's transgenderism, whatever. I'm not saying I'm against or for it. I'm saying if we're going to have an honest discussion as a physician, but they say, if you don't believe what we believe, we're going to take away your credentialing. Now we can't have a discussion anymore about anything. That should scare physicians.
Yeah, and that leads to the next question, Rich, which I think is something where it would unify us. And that is, what do you think the biggest challenge facing medicine, of all the challenges that you've mentioned, over the next 10 years? What do you think is the thing we need to be focused on the most?
Cost. There's no doubt about it. If you think that America is mad about the cost of inflation right now, which is the number one issue in America right now, is inflation and high energy costs. Those go hand in hand. Think about how much money comes out of your wallet. $400 extra per month comes out of your wallet when you have double the price of gasoline, which also, by the way, affects what you pay at the grocery store for all the consumables. Now add to that your healthcare costs went up by 9.7% last year alone. That means that if you're a healthcare, if you're a person paying for healthcare out of your insurance, that means your insurance probably went up anywhere from 15 to 20%. That's unsustainable. And every year we're seeing these record profits off of what basically ended up being non-transparent hikes in prices with the PBMs and pharmaceuticals. The insurance company takes their cut because they're set at 20%. They're only allowed to make so much profit, but the more we consume in price shares, the more they make. If it's a bigger piece of the puzzle, the more we spend, the bigger the money they make, because it's based off a percentage. There's no skin in the game for patients to save money when you do it that way. They literally go and their deductible's gone anyway, so they just buy whatever. They have no incentive to buy the right drug, to go to the right physician, to shop anything. So there's no reason to go outside of a monopolistic practice, or there's no reason to buy your drug at Walgreens instead of CVS, or Costco instead of CVS, because you really don't care. If we used our car insurance the same way, you'd be using your healthcare to, you'd be using your car insurance to change your car oil or to replace a blinker that just went out. And guess what? It would cost 10 times more. That's how we're using our healthcare insurance right now. We're using it for all the wrong things.
Interesting. All right. So you have this brilliant 20-year military career. You're on the front lines in the emergency room. You're seeing these terrible overdoses coming in. Now you want to go to DC. How are you going to leverage all of that to be the leader that you really want to be up there? And where is this going to go for you?
Well, one thing we have to stop doing in DC is, I think, demonizing each other. And I'm not talking about just Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about Republicans and Republicans. You're a rhino, you're a crazy. And then we don't get anything done because we're so busy trying to vie for position or raise money for your campaign that we don't actually come up with something that we can pass. There's several things we agree on. That's why I love having a big freshman class. I think we can really make some inroads of people who are idealistic and really want to do the right thing. I think when it comes to medicine, especially having a group of doctors come up with a great solution for healthcare and bring them up there in front of the doctors caucus and get in front of whoever the leader is, whoever the speaker is, and actually come up with a healthcare plan that makes sense and that has that shows we have skin in the game, that you're bringing healthcare professionals up there that actually care about patient advocacy, about the pre-approval process, about surprise billing, about all the things that make Americans sad about the kind of healthcare that they have. When we should have one of the best, we should have the best. There's no doubt in my mind that America should have the best healthcare system in the world, and we do in many ways. But it's not affordable anymore, and that's because we're doing some very egregious things that have nothing to do with this as physicians. But physicians can really come to the table and lead the way on how to solve this. Now, that doesn't come from demonizing PBMs or pharmaceuticals, but bring them to the table and say, guess what? If you don't help us, we are going to have a problem. We're going to have to expose it. We have to be very transparent about where the problems are coming from. And I know just by saying that, it could cause me some real problems. I don't want to be at odds with PBMs and pharmaceuticals. I want to work with you to really come up with something that solves the problem before it's too late. And we really bankrupt the system.
I think that's so smart. It's always better to be a team leader with a team. And you certainly learned that in the last 20 years, fighting for our country and then fighting on the front lines in the emergency room. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can't find a better candidate. Rich, you're so kind to come spend the night helping us understand a little bit more about Washington, about Medicare, about our government, and most importantly, about how we can take better care of our patients. Thank you for your service to your country, and thank you for your upcoming service to all of us as physicians and to our patients.
Well, hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you. I appreciate my fellow physicians for standing in the gap during this very trying time for the last couple of years. I hope I'll garner your support. Full disclosure, I was a student body president at Morehouse School of Medicine. Same year Obama was president of the United States, and there's a reason for that. We're all on the same side. Ultimately, when you're having a bad day, you should get a hug. If I love you, and if you're hungry, I should feed you. We are in this together. This is something that it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. We have a job to do to serve our patients and make sure we have good health care for years to come. And I hope we can work together with that. And if you want to visit my website, it's richmccormick.us. God bless you.
Thank you. We have a chance to meet and greet with Rich at Dr. Yadov's house. If you look at the MAA website, we'll have that flyer for you and that invitation. And all who are interested in getting to know this fine leader, I encourage you to come meet him. He's quite a man, and we're honored to have you working with us. Thank you.
Semper Fi. Thank you so much.
All right.